We're really not talking about sex as much as we probably have made it sound like, but what we're really after today is what really makes sex great, and that is intimacy. So let's just start with the idea of what is intimacy, okay? Now, like so many words in English, today, that word intimacy has completely changed. You didn't have to leave. I kind of liked you up here. It's completely changed from what maybe even my generation we understood intimacy, but certainly what the intention of intimacy was meant to mean. So today, pretty much if I were to say, well, that's, we're intimate, let's just be honest, most people would say, oh, you're having sex, right? You'd say we're having sex, we're intimate, we're having sex, And it's come to almost exclusively mean sex. And that's really, really sad because actually intimacy has very little to do with sex as just a separate entity. Now, the great thing is that intimacy can actually make sex into what it's meant to be, what God intended to be. Intimacy can do that. It can turn sex, the sex drive, the raw sex drive, into what God intends it to be. And that's what we're after. The goal is not to have great sex. The goal is to have great intimacy. And that actually can exist without sex. We can be intimate with each other without sex at all. I remember when I was pastoring, I'll tell you one of the most intimate moments I've ever seen in my life. I was pastoring out in West Lauren, and there was a lady there who had had a terrible, terrible illness that left her completely debilitated. She couldn't talk. She could barely move her hands. She could squeeze. That was it. And because as a pastor of a rural community, and not just because I'm supposed to, but because I loved it, I would go probably every week to visit all the people who were in my hospital. And when I would go in to this woman's room, sitting by her side was her husband. And he would be holding her hand, and he would come every day for about 2 hours. He would be holding her hand, and he would be saying to her, I love you so much. I'm so grateful that you were in my life. And things like that, talking about things that they'd done before. And I sometimes would just stand outside of the door because I didn't want to interrupt it and just listen to this man making love to his wife, making real love, the kind of love that if they were physically able to make love would have made the best kind of relationship sexually that you can have, because they were intimate. They had intimacy. They weren't even able to have sex, but they had intimacy. And that is the goal of Christian marriage. I really believe it is. That is what we are called to be with each other. We are called to be intimate. So let's just look at a few of the words. I've got to pull this up so I can actually see it. First of all, the reason why sex is not intimacy is because sex can be used for just about anything, and we use it for just about anything, right? We use sex for pleasure. We use sex for power. We use sex for selling things. We use sex to make money. We use sex to get a promotion. We use sex for love. Sex in itself can become just another form of selfishness. And I think there's really two kinds of sex in the world. And really, when you think about all the aberrations of sex, all the perversions, all the things that we think, well, like how do people ever get themselves into this place? Here's how it happens. It happens when we view sex as being disconnected from intimacy. That sex is disconnected from a relationship of stability and a relationship of love that is a committed relationship that lasts forever. That is a long-term, long-standing relationship in which intimacy can be built. When we just think that sex is fun and we like doing it, we'll go from one degree of reprobation to another. And in the process of that, we'll be destroying each other's lives. And that's true, like people talk about lust. And I want to say to you that, I'm never sure what people mean when they say, well, my husband or my wife is just full of lust. If that means that they want to do something sexually that you don't want to do, that may not be lust. It may just be a difference in what your desires are. If it means that they have turned you and every other person in their life into an object, then yes, I would say that's lust. When you turn another human being into an object of your pleasure, just simply as an object, then that is what I believe the biblical definition of lust is. When Jesus says, if you looked on that woman to lust after her, then you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. And every guy I know when we were in university, every guy I know was going around going, oh, I can't look, I can't look, I can't look. No, I can't look. Oh, I've got to go pray and fast. Lust is not desire. God created desire. Lust is when you would say, I'm going to take that person's gift of her or his sexuality, and I'm going to steal it from them and whoever their partner is, and I'm going to use it for myself. It's when they are turned into an object. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that can be done in marriage just as easily as it can be done in the world. And when we lose that sense of other, of loving the other, of caring for the other, when we lose that sense of connection, when we lose that sense of true intimacy, then there's no end to what the devil will bring us to delight us, to move us into more and more narcissism and more of our own self. So, that being said, sex is not intimacy. It's not. But intimacy can make sex into the other kind of sex, and that is a life-giving, bonding relationship between a man and a woman in marriage. And it can be amazing when there is true intimacy. But intimacy is what has to be there first. The other cannot be there alone because that'll just destroy the marriages, and all you got to do is look around and see that it does. Okay? Intimacy, the first, I want to look at some of the definitions. Okay? So the word intimate comes from the Latin word intimare, and that Latin word means to make known. To make known. Wow, that's interesting. Intimate, to make known. Okay, well, let's go a little further. The Hebrew expression for what Adam did with his wife when they first had sex was to know. Yada. To know. He knew her. Wow, there it goes again. In John 10, 14 through 15, there's a description of the intimacy that Jesus has with us and the Father. And it uses the word that is typically used for intimacy, and that is ginosko. And it means, what do you think it means? To know. To know. Just as the Father knows, genoikoi, knows me, and I know genoko, the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own are known of me. So in the two biblical languages, and in English and Latin, from where we derive our English word, intimacy primarily involves knowing. Knowing. Now, you know, like when you have casual sex, you have no idea who you're even having sex with. Like, you can't know a person simply by having sex. It doesn't equate to knowing. You know, like when you look at the lives of people who have expended their lives to have sex every time that they possibly wanted, their lives end up in complete and total dismal loneliness. And even though they're connected in the most physical way with one another, there's no knowing. There's no relationship of knowing. And what God is looking for is for people who are married to know each other. And that's a wonderful thing, you know. And that means that intimacy can't happen on the first night you're married. It starts then, and intimacy starts before then when you first get to know each other. But really, intimacy is a lifelong journey of getting to know each other in the context of a single relationship with each other. And that knowing has been given the impetus of Christian marriage to say that knowing is in order to love them. To know them in order to love them. To know them in order to find out what it is that will fulfill their lives and what you can bring to the relationship with them. And then that creates intimacy. I think you could probably say it's like friendship, except it has the sexual connotation in marriage. But it is like friendship. Like intimacy is like friendship. It's like we enjoy each other's company. We like hanging out together. We want to work through whatever problems that we are in a positive and a life-giving way with each other because we care about each other. We don't want to harm each other. We want to bless each other. And we definitely are not into a relationship of power or manipulation or domination with one another. And we're definitely not trying to take from the other person something that they don't want to give. So intimacy is the foundation of marriage and of sexual relationships. Carie. Can I stand next to you and just look?
Oh, he's so cute.
You're in trouble now.
So one of the reasons why we want to introduce this topic is because sexual incompatibility and money are the top two reasons that people divorce. That's pretty shocking, isn't it? So they change places every now and again, but we thought we should deal with both of those. So I wanted to bring you some bad news first before I bring you the good news. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the implications of when a marriage fails. So many people are desperate to find sexual fulfillment. We all watch the lives of the beautiful, the rich, and the famous descend into utter chaos, addiction, and mental illness, still always looking for yet another partner. And I know when I go through the grocery line, I'm checking up on some of the beautiful and the rich and the famous. I don't want to know too much, but I'm very sad because, you know, these are the most beautiful people in our society, right? That should, by all outward things, that really have little meaning, I think, to us as believers. But many people think they've got what it takes to make it work, but they don't. And so this relationship that they entered into so confidently is in shambles now. The lavish wedding decorations and the dress went to the local thrift store or the auction block, And the children that come out of the relationship are used as bartering chips, and they're destroyed by parents who each want or don't want a piece of them. The people they trusted most have broken their promises and are now looking for someone new. The success rate of second marriages is not great either. As we go into a new relationship, but we haven't resolved why the first marriage failed, the stats are dismal. First marriages end today at a rate of nearly 50%. Second marriages end in divorce at 67% of the time. Third marriages end in divorce 73% of the time. That's pretty shocking, isn't it? But as I said, they did not resolve the issues. In all the years of hearing people's stories of why they ended their marriage, I've only ever heard one person who actually admitted that they were the responsible party in the breakup of the marriage. I find that incredibly interesting. Only one, and I've heard lots of stories. And this is partly why we feel inspired to talk about and to encourage your marriages. The spiritual, emotional, and financial implications of a failed marriage are huge. Children go through lingering trauma of divorce, and they suffer greatly. I would say they are almost the ones that suffer the most. Not only in the time of separation, but probably more afterwards. And some of us have parents that have walked through that, so we know exactly what that's like. When the marriage ends, the family income, the home, and all the resources are divided. And interestingly, often the parent who raises the children goes into a life of complete poverty. If that parent brings in a new partner, those children are twice as likely to suffer academically, behaviorally, and socially compared to children who live with their biological parents. In a study that we read called Child Abuse and Other Risks of Not Living with Both Parents, it's published in a publication called Ethology and Sociobiology. This was their conclusion. If their parents find new partners, children are 40 times more likely than those who live with their biological parents to be sexually or physically abused. Leonard shared with you last week the trauma that he experienced when his father left for good when he was 9. 7 stepfathers followed in his father's footsteps. Not only did his dad leave, but Mom left too, by having to take on 2 jobs just to take care of the kids, the 2 boys. And Leonard many times said he would open the fridge or the cupboards, there would be no food to eat. If it wasn't for school lunches, he said, we would have literally starved. And it's cute because Leonard is a great shopper and he goes out and does all the groceries. And one day I said to him, he loves to fill the cupboards up with food. And the fridge, we have a downstairs fridge too. And one day I said to him, what's behind this? Because, and he said, I think it goes back to my childhood when there wasn't anything. And he said, just one of the things I love to do is I love to go out and buy food for my family. You see, there was that, it was a positive outcome, right? Although we have to be the creative cook to cook all this food, and a lot of it I invite my kids all over and tell them, take home lots of food. Anyway, so there you have it. Leonard at first dreamed of a career of teaching the Bible at a Christian university, but our awesome God redirected his footsteps, and he mostly taught students in lower income schools where a large percentage of students were from single parent families. Isn't that interesting how God redeems those things? He was one of the first male kindergarten teachers to be hired by the London District School Board. He was a great kindergarten teacher, but believe me, some eyebrows were raised by mothers who were not sure if they could trust this man. But yes, over time they found out he could be trusted. And young boys who were growing up without dads found a loving and encouraging man they could look up to, and through his example, they too could hope to become a responsible and loving man. So right now, I would like us to just sit at our tables and talk about what our thoughts are about the negative consequences of divorce for couples and their children. So let's just take about 10 minutes and do that.